The Red Demon. Some demons take their time showing up, but not this one. He appears right behind someone's shoulder and completely shatters the silence. The lipstick face demon might have a strange name, but he's one of the most terrifying monsters in modern horror. His appearance in Insidious defined a generation of jump scares and solidified the horror style created by James Wan. He's the evil heart of the so-called Further, the dark spiritual plane where trapped souls wander forever, and the way he manifests is pure visual perversion. Red skin, black markings, yellow eyes like a starving animal, and claws that seem to scratch the air itself. The design may follow the classic demon archetype, horns, hooves, painted face, but what makes him unforgettable is how he's filmed. He appears suddenly without warning in the middle of an ordinary conversation. 1 second, everything's calm. The next, hell materializes. He doesn't run, he waits, lurks, breathes behind his victims as if he's smelling their fear. And when he finally attacks, the sound that comes with him is just as important as the image. A deep, distorted roar that cuts through the silence like an electric shock. The lipstick face demon represents the invasion of home, the primal fear of something invisible hiding in the dark corners of your own house. He doesn't need to possess bodies. He feeds on the fragility of the living, on sleep, curiosity, and doubt. And that's why, despite the almost funny name, he became a true horror icon of the 2010s. The Crooked Man. The Crooked Man is a living distortion, a nightmare born from a children's nursery rhyme. His origin is an old British folk song, simple and innocent at first glance. But when that rhyme echoes through the shadows of the Hodgson's house, something takes shape. Something tall, thin, something that couldn't possibly be human. He moves unnaturally as if his bones were put together at the wrong angles. Every step comes with cracking sounds like breaking wood. And when he finally appears in full, his whole body looks like a cursed marionette, with a forced, grotesque smile frozen on his face. The Crooked Man doesn't just scare, he disorients. He's the kind of creature that makes your eyes doubt what they're seeing. What makes him so memorable is exactly that. He's corrupted childhood, a symbol of how fear can grow from what once felt safe. A song, a toy, a bedtime rhyme. James Wan turns an innocent verse into a living abomination, and the result is one of the most unforgettable appearances in the Conjuring universe. But the most sinister detail is that he isn't an independent being. He's an extension of Valak himself, a nightmare trick used to manipulate a child's mind. That's why the Crooked Man became an icon among modern monsters, not just for his grotesque design, but because he embodies pure psychological terror. The Entity That Walks. Some monsters run, others fly, but this one just walks. In It Follows, terror doesn't come from claws or screams, it comes from the certainty that something is coming. The entity is an invisible force that moves from victim to victim through one intimate act, sex. Whoever is marked becomes forever followed by a shape-shifting figure. It could be a stranger in a crowd, a close friend, or even someone who's already dead. But one thing never changes when it walks. Always in a straight line, always toward you. The curse is almost biological. A kind of supernatural virus passed through human contact. Passing it on is the only way to escape. But that doesn't erase the moral weight of the choice. Saving yourself by condemning someone else. The entity doesn't talk, doesn't scream, doesn't hesitate. It can't be stopped, only delayed. It never appears with the same face, which makes it even scarier. It hides in plain sight. Anyone walking toward you could be the end. What makes this creature unforgettable is its simplicity. It Follows is the nightmare of the modern age, the silent terror of knowing danger is always coming, even when everything seems normal. Pennywise. Pennywise is more than a clown. He's fear made flesh. The creature that haunts Derry, known only as It, is a cosmic entity that existed long before humans. It feeds on emotions, but prefers the taste of childhood terror. And it's patient. Every 27 years, it wakes from its deep sleep to hunt again. That's why it takes the form of a dancing clown. Colorful, cheerful, seemingly harmless, until the smile stretches too wide, the eyes drift apart, and the voice turns into a whisper from hell. But the genius of Pennywise lies in the fact that he has no fixed shape. He changes depending on what his victim fears most. For each member of the Losers Club, he was something different. Eddie sees a rotting leper, the embodiment of his obsessive fear of disease. Stan is hunted by the distorted woman from the painting that already haunted him before. Beverly faces the blood flooding her bathroom, a reflection of her family trauma. Pennywise studies his victims. He knows exactly where it hurts, what terrifies them, what paralyzes them. And for those who think it can't get worse, there's his true form, an interdimensional cluster of cosmic orbs known as the Deadlights. beast, capable of driving anyone insane just by looking. It's horror taken to the level of the incomprehensible. Pennywise is a rare fusion of the physical and the metaphysical, a creature from another world wearing the mask of a clown to make fear relatable. And that's where the true terror lies. He understands people. He knows exactly what scares each one and uses it to destroy them. Xenomorphs. The xenomorph wasn't created to scare, and it was created to hunt. When Ridley Scott released Alien in 1979, he basically turned a haunted house story into one set in space. But instead of ghosts and creaky floors, the horror came from a perfect biological nightmare stalking the crew through the metallic halls of the Nostromo. The creature's design by Swiss artist H.R. Giger is unmistakable. A tall humanoid body, a black biomechanical exoskeleton, a long eyeless head, and a double jaw that shoots forward like a deadly trap. It's a disturbing fusion of organic and mechanical beauty and disgust, flesh and machine. And that was with one of the most iconic moments in cinema history, the birth of the chestburster, the tiny alien that bursts out of Kane's chest in a spray of blood and screams, before disappearing into the ship's metallic corridors. That scene didn't just traumatize audiences, it redefined the very concept of body horror. The genius of Alien is in its simplicity. The monster doesn't need a backstory, it's a pure predator. Instinctive, silent, hiding in vents and killing the crew one by one. No hatred, no emotion, just purpose. But the real terror comes from the metaphor behind it. The xenomorph represents the fear of invasion, forced gestation, the human body violated and used as a tool for creation, a brutal symbol of survival instinct taken to the extreme. Decades later, the creature evolved, from aliens to Prometheus, from Covenant to Alien. Isolation, the xenomorph adapted to each new era while keeping the same purpose, reminding humanity that it's not at the top of the food chain. The metallic hiss of acid eating through the floor, the slow click of jaws opening. These are sounds that still fuel nightmares to this day.
Don't get under it, don't get under it.
Samara. 7 days. That's the time between watching and dying. In the ring, fear doesn't come from roaring monsters or screaming demons. It comes from something silent, inevitable, cursed by human curiosity. The cursed tape doesn't kill, it transmits, and what it carries within it is the very essence of resentment. Samara Morgan. Samara isn't a typical ghost. She's the echo of a forgotten child, rejected and locked in a well until she died. But death didn't end her suffering. It only gave form to her hatred. Her power was born from trauma, and her presence is a perfect metaphor for what resentment becomes when left to rot in the dark. The pale face, the soaked hair covering her eyes, the disjointed movements, all created one of the most iconic images in modern horror. When Samara crawls out of the TV screen, the impossible happens. The line between the real and the supernatural breaks. Fear literally steps out of the story to reach the viewer. But the horror in the ring goes beyond the image. The curse is a cycle passed from person to person, spreading like an emotional virus. The only way to survive is to reproduce the trauma, copy and show the tape to someone new. You live at the cost of condemning another. Pinhead. Some monsters scream, others simply invite. Pinhead doesn't need to run or roar. He speaks calmly, and every word sounds like a sentence. It all begins with a box, small, golden, mysterious. Those who open it believe they're seeking pleasure, but what it truly unleashes is pain. And on the other side, they wait. The Cenobites, beings from another dimension, devoted to a philosophy where pain and pleasure are one and the same. And at the center of this cult, the most iconic of them all, Pinhead. In Clive Barker's masterpiece Hellraiser, Pinhead appears for the first time with pale skin divided into geometric lines, nails embedded with surgical precision. There's no rush, no rage. The cruelty is aesthetic, almost poetic. He doesn't kill, he offers experiences, and when he says, it's not a threat, it's a promise.
Soul apart.
Pinhead is intellectual horror, the demon who understands the human mind and destroys it with surgical precision. His presence feels almost religious, and his symmetrical face is the perfect image of balance between the sacred and the profane. Decades later, Hell was reopened, and this time the box was opened by another generation, and Pinhead was reborn. In the Hellraiser reboot, 2022, the tone remains the same, calm, hypnotic, ritualistic. But now there's something different, a divine serenity, even more terrifying because it feels compassionate. She doesn't scream, doesn't mock, she understands, and that's what's most frightening. The new Cenobites are bodies turned into living sculptures of suffering, folds and cuts replacing clothing. And Pinhead, now called the Priest, is their supreme artist. The essence remains intact. There's no hell of flames, only one of sensations. No pure evil, only curiosity, an endless search for human limits. In any version, Pinhead is more than a villain. He's the embodiment of what happens when pleasure crosses the body and reaches the soul. The kind of monster who doesn't need to chase you, because deep down, you're the one who called for him.
Take me like you took them.
The Pale Man. Guillermo del Toro has created many unforgettable monsters, but none as disturbing or as symbolic as the Pale Man. At first glance, he looks harmless, sitting motionless at the head of the table, pale skin, enormous hands resting gently on the cloth. But something feels wrong. His face is smooth, eyeless, lifeless, and then the details begin to weigh in. Around the room, piles of tiny children's shoes, a silent monument to the lives he's already consumed, until he rises and places his eyeballs into the palms of his hands, turning the simplest gesture in the world into pure terror. The Pale Man moves like a broken puppet, floating somewhere between hunger and silence. Every step is unnervingly deliberate, and the sound of his heavy breathing fills the air like an invisible threat. But the horror goes far beyond appearance. The Pale Man is an allegorical monster, like a living critique of greed, tyranny, and moral blindness. In Pan's Labyrinth, he represents the kind of power that devours innocence, the adult who consumes what is pure and fragile, literally since he feeds on children. The feast laid out before him is a cruel symbol. Plenty of food, gold, abundance, yet untouched. Because the Pale Man doesn't feed on pleasure, he feeds on disobedience. All it takes is someone touching what they shouldn't, and he awakens. Visually, he's a masterpiece of the grotesque. Waxy skin hanging like melting candle wax, long blade-like nails, and eyes placed where they shouldn't be. Everything about him is unnatural and therefore impossible to forget. The Entity. A smile is the first expression we learn, but sometimes it's also the last. In Smile, fear has no shape. It just grins. The Entity is an invisible presence that feeds on human trauma, like a psychological parasite jumping from victim to victim, spreading a cycle of despair. It only appears to those carrying deep pain, and the more someone tries to escape, the closer it gets, until it fully takes over the mind. The rule is simple and cruel. The Entity reveals itself, forces the victim to take their own life in front of someone else, and the trauma passes on. A perfect cycle of pain and contagion. But the horror of Smile goes beyond the curse. The creature is a mirror of deep sadness, a portrait of what the world refuses to see. Just like the forced smile of someone saying, "I'm fine," while falling apart inside, the Entity hides behind normality. It appears as loved ones, familiar faces, comforting voices. And when it finally shows its true form, what we see is the opposite of joy, a hollow, strained grin, masking pure agony. The protagonist, Rose, is a therapist, someone who dedicates her life to healing others' pain, yet has never faced her own. Since childhood, she's carried the guilt of her mother's death, a wound that never healed. The Entity doesn't choose her by chance. It senses trauma, uses it, amplifies it, until the mind collapses under guilt's weight. It's a curse built on human truth. Like It Follows in The Ring, the fear here is transmissible, but in Smile, it's emotional. Evil spreads through empathy, through shared pain, through witnessing someone suffering without being able to help. The movie flips the meaning of comfort. Smiles, symbols of happiness, become masks of despair, and the Entity embodies that contrast, evil wearing a face of serenity. When it finally reveals its real body, a giant, skinless creature, anatomy exposed, with a grotesque grin carved across its face, there are no screams. Just a reminder that the most devastating fear doesn't come from visible monsters, but from what we try to hide behind a smile. Pazuzu. Before CGI, before jump scares, before loud soundtracks, there was only silence. And within that silence, a raspy voice impossible to forget.
Loosen the straps. Now kindly undo these straps. That's much too vulgar display of power, Carrie.
Pazuzu doesn't appear directly, he creeps in, first as a whisper in a little girl's room, then as an invisible force that makes the bed shake, the crucifix move, and the priest's faith crumble. Inspired by an ancient Mesopotamian demon of wind and plague, Pazuzu represents something far deeper than mere possession. He's chaos taking shape inside the human soul, evil not from the outside but awakened from within. The visual and sonic impact of this entity was so massive that it took 3 people to bring it to life. Linda Blair gave it the body of corrupted innocence. Mercedes McCambridge, with her guttural, torn voice, gave it its soul. And Eileen Dietz, covered in white makeup and demonic eyes, gave it a face. Together, they created a creature that's never fully shown, yet dominates every frame. The brilliance of The Exorcist lies in the fact that Pazuzu isn't just seen, he's felt. The air grows heavy, sounds seem to come from inside the walls, and Reagan's stare, now fully possessed, wounds deeper than any graphic scene could. And behind the physical horror, the green vomit, spinning head, distorted voice, there's something even more disturbing. The feeling of helplessness before something that neither science, faith, nor reason can explain. Pazuzu is a symbol of profanation. He turns what is pure, a child, faith, motherhood, into a stage for blasphemy. The Thing. In this movie, horror begins with something simple, an animal running, but what looks like just another lost creature hides what might be the most terrifying organism in cinema. The Thing is fear in its purest state, a being capable of perfectly imitating any form of life. Its body has no fixed form. It's a living, shapeless mass of flesh, bone, and instinct. When it infects a host, it absorbs every cell, every memory, and creates an identical copy, indistinguishable. And that's where the real horror begins. No one knows who's still human. John Carpenter's genius lies in turning fear of the monster into fear of each other. The Thing doesn't just terrify through what it does, it terrifies through what it causes: paranoia, mistrust, isolation. Within days, the research station becomes a frozen hell of silence and suspicion, where everyone stares at one another, asking the same question: who's still real? Tentacles, mouths within mouths, bodies fusing and twisting into impossible shapes. Nothing is predictable, nothing repeats. Each appearance of the Thing is a new abomination. Biological horror in constant mutation, but beneath all that pulsing flesh lies something deeper. The Thing is the fear of losing identity, of your body being taken, your humanity dissolved into something collective and mindless. In the end, no one knows if the creature was truly destroyed. Maybe it's still there, asleep under the ice, waiting for the warmth of another host. Because the Thing doesn't need eyes or a voice, it just survives. And that's the greatest horror of all. A monster that isn't evil, just inevitable. These are the monsters that defined horror in cinema. And what makes them immortal isn't what they do, it's what they represent. And if you like this video, you'll also want to check out Horror Movies Where Evil Wins. Click on the screen and watch. I'll see you there.